Frank Heijmann from Dutch Customs Authorities, who will be talking about the enforcement philosophy and policy of the Dutch authorities.
Yes, Frank. Thank you, Walter. A little bit of different story, not going to in depth into legal acts, not going into all kind of court cases, but it's a little bit about how a customs organization can manage these flows, because it's easy to say that you have to reject something on an individual basis and a case-by-case analysis, but everything related in customs is easier said than done because they have more than one task. It's not only about valuation, actually looking into current days, current times, then valuation, although from a European Commission perspective, it seems to be the most important that we do, because they jump on the fiscality and all the rules and set in the Union Customs Code. They are almost all focusing on let's say the money, capturing the money, capturing the customs debt, but in today's world, it's only a very minor part of what customs is relevant about. Look at import duties. It's I think it's 17 or 18% of the European budget. So in that sense, it's important. But looking at the pressure, the burden of import duties on international trade, you can almost neglect it. In average, if you look at the total burden, I did some calculations on the Dutch tax burden, and it's when you took the total amount of imports in the Netherlands, 400 billion, about 400 billion euros value, and the tax burden on that was 1.3% on import duties total. It's duties, anti-dumping duties, all the European taxes. And if I then take out chapters 2, 16, 54, 60, 61, 62, which are textiles, meat, then these are the few chapters where there's still some relevance, of course. Then I calculate the rest, and the burden of import duties is only 0.5%. And if you then look at the whole mechanism that we build around it, and you compare that to the mechanism of VAT, 20% VAT in average, or even more, then it's completely out of balance. But it's because the customs has more tasks, because they also contribute to safety and security and a lot of non-fiscal tasks. And that is 1,500 rules, regulations, etc., that have to be controlled. And it's not only about the fiscality, it's also about whether bombs and grenades are being imported. It's also about whether the Christmas lights that you buy via internet, when you put them at home in the wall, that your house doesn't light on fire. So there are much more relevance than only the fiscal aspect. And customs valuation is only about the fiscal aspect. And customs, they have to find a balance in doing that. They have to find a balance in concentrating on the fiscal aspect, concentrating on all those non-fiscal aspects of safety and security. And at the same time, they have to concentrate a little bit on trade, because everything is happening in international logistics. And we have a law, a customs system that dates back to the time that we still had a captain of a ship which came offshore, and he really signed for a document and looked on what he's carrying on the ship. And this is going back to the 30s. And now in today's world, we have digital transactions. We have containers moving around the world where nobody actually knows what is in there. We have e-commerce parcels flying within 24 hours, and the payment was already done before it's received. So this whole mechanism doesn't work. So you have to apply rules, regulations, enforcement, and at the same time in a completely different logistic world and a different logistic environment. And if you then look at transactions compared, I can only talk about the Dutch situation, some statistics from the Netherlands. This is the development of customs declarations in the Netherlands. All different colors about all different systems. We have import and export systems. We have entry and exit systems. We have e-commerce systems, which is then called to be a simplified procedure for a simplified data set. But all the way back in 2007, we dealt with about 22 million declarations. The majority of it was post-clearance. Everything here, red and green, this is showing what is real-time processing or post-clearance processing. And when you see that we, here the majority was done post-clearance. Now we have IT, we have digitization, and this means that due to digitization, everything that we installed in companies' records, that we do control post-clearance, that we have to transfer it to digital transactions in a real-time environment. And now come to customs value. Look at, we have in the Netherlands, 250 companies. They have a monthly declaration system. They are fully controlled on post-clearance mechanisms. These are actually the companies where our valuation team is dealing with a lot of transfer pricing in combination with customs valuation. These are the big intercompany movements. Due to new customs legislation, the UCC, we have to create also for those companies a transaction-based digital communication for each individual shipment. This means that the digitization will even make it more difficult to apply all the rules. Because for those companies, we could use the calculation mechanisms on the real contract and not on the individual shipment. But now, due to IT obligations, we have to move to the individual shipment. So the world is even getting more difficult for us. Looking at the amount of declarations, e-commerce, very nice, 25 million in 2018, 25 million declarations Dutch customs handled. 2021, in this whole figure, there are 376 million declarations for e-commerce. You talked about 80 and 100 million in total. The Netherlands last year, 521 million declarations for import. If you want to control those in the traditional way, somehow stop it. The philosophy that customs stop goods and open parcels. If we want to control out of 521 million parcels, you can start calculating, but we would need to do about 1,850 physical controls per minute, 7 over 24, 365 days a year. And this would apply about 45,000 people of staff. And this would lead to 0.05% of physical controls. Just to give you an idea about what it's about dealing with large amounts. This is impossible. And it's also impossible looking at, for example, this large e-commerce flow. The total value of that e-commerce flow is less than 1.5 billion. In VAT, we talk about 350 million euros. Neglectable amounts compared to the billions of VAT in European turnover. So you have to take you have to make choices. And how we make choices? That we make choices by splitting flows. Splitting flows means we have to take into account the business sector. We have to be efficient. It has to be predictable. We simply cannot stop the whole harbor. We introduced 3 weeks ago, it's now 4 weeks ago, we introduced this Russian sanctions. Yeah, then customs really have to stop goods. And we were working on it, I think, 8 hours. And then 6,400 containers were blocked in the Rotterdam harbor. Complete logistics is down. So we have to think of mechanisms where we can do it a bit different, and that's why we have a risk-based approach. Not everything can and will be checked. And what we try to do is we try to separate all kind of flows in what we call green, yellow, and blue. And the yellow one are the ones of which we do have a lot of information available all the way from the source. So we can reuse information from, for example, a platform. If they want to share information with us and we can reuse that already, then you can already make a determination about that the goods can move immediately when they enter. We have certified companies. These are trustworthy companies, which we know, and then we have another flow. Compare it a little bit as when goods enter, compare it a little bit with a haystack. And customs is searching for a needle in the haystack. And if you have a very big haystack, then it's very difficult to find a needle. So what we try to do is to create 3 haystacks. And the yellow haystack is the one where we say, we know that from the beginning there was no needle in there, because we had my colleagues all over other side of the world, or trusted companies that already checked there's no needle in there. And we have the trusted traders, which are the reliable companies. If there would be a needle in their haystack, then they would report it to me. And then we have the blue flow, which is then this much smaller haystack where I do have to concentrate on. And based on that, I can still work risk-based, but I do accept the level of trust that certain companies can give me. And then this is the total model that we actually use, where a lot of information comes in. And when we split the flows, and we have the trusted traders, and trusted traders means post-clearance audit. We do not intervene in the logistical chain, simply because it is not possible. The trusted trade lanes, no intervention in logistics, hardly any controls, because we know that where the goods come from, for example, you have those trade lanes in place with the US, that the US colleagues signed off for the content, they provided me with the information, so why should I intervene? And I concentrate on the blue flow. The only difficulty is that in the theory, we hope that a lot of goods could be in green and a lot of goods could be in yellow and only a few in blue, where I still have to do my interventions. Reality is that due to e-commerce, not in value, but in amount, we have enormous flows in this blue area. But that's why we start doing a deeper analysis of these flows. And we have 2 focuses. The one is, if you still have flows where a lot of high flows, high level amounts of goods coming by, where the risk that there is a needle in there is high, I want to create machines, all kinds of machines, where the goods go through, and I have auto detection of the risks. And we are actually putting in place now the first CT scanners, where, and it's not about value, it's about the other risks. We are putting in place the first CT scans, and we put them in place in the sorting belts of the logistic service providers, the express companies. When the goods come in, they go through the machine with a high speed, all those small parcels, and the machine itself says automatically, there are pills in there, there are drugs in there, there are weapons in there, or it's safe, from a non-fiscal perspective. And we hope to make those machines smarter and smarter, that they can detect more and more over time. And then our intervention is only there when the machine says something is wrong. In that sense, we do not check anything in the traditional way. But the machine can do a lot. We can learn machines to read those images automatically, but the machine cannot help us in detecting additional information that is needed to determine risks, like the itinerary, the operators, the origin, all the fundamentals that we need for the tariff. That cannot be done in the machine, and that's why we also put a lot of effort in artificial intelligence, data analytics, so where the auto detection is not only on the cargo, but it's also on the information. And what we try to do is to automate the traditional process. And actually what's written here is the process that Santiago a little bit described. From a customs declaration is being entered in the customs system, and the customs officer opens that declaration and he starts asking questions with himself, and he wants to have additional information. And with the additional information, he tries to interpret the additional information that he receives from the declarant, and based on that, he will maybe decide to do a physical control or not. That's the theory. But the theory doesn't work with 521 million import declarations a year. So that's why we said this has to be automated. And what we're doing is we're building a system that's called Customs Real-Time Information System, where all this added information that we need, all this context information, additional information from those website sources, those international sources, is automatically added to the customs declaration. For example, that reference database that we have, which is an indicator, not a statistical data, but an indicator for risk assessment, we simply program them in the system, and if there is a hit, then in the system, then we will look, then the system automatically will react and says, this is below this level, you have to do something. But still, if I would program all those risk rules, those, let's say, those textiles minimum values in the system, and I would start having an automated hit on every single declaration that is below that value, still not possible for me to manage. Because if only 1% would be a hit on that, then still I would have millions to deal with. So not possible. So what I do is I add other information to that information, and that creates an automated decision. The world is computerized. We cannot do anything manual anymore in the regular process. And if you want to do anything manual, then it must be done post-clearance. It can only be done afterwards. Real time, for us, it's not possible. In the automated environment, we have sensor data, we have open source data, we have declaration data, and we have artificial intelligence. And that is at the end helping us. And I compare it a little bit to when you would drive on a motorway. Let's suppose you have a motorway in some nice southern European country. There is a road. Sometimes children cross the road, and it's dangerous. Cars speed too much, but it's not a busy road. So what you do, you put a police officer there, and simple fact that he's there will already reduce the speeding. And sometimes he has a laser gun, and he stops someone when he speeds, and you get a fine when you speed, and he checks your license, and your driver license, and your car registration. But that is the best option to achieve that on that road, in this beautiful area in the south of Europe, there's no speeding anymore. But here we have a road where between Amsterdam and Utrecht, where every day 400, 500,000 cars pass over 8, 10 lanes of motorway. So what we do is we don't stop any car. We build cameras all the way over the motorway. The cameras have automated recognition of car, vehicle registration. It automatically checks 100% of the cars if you have a valid registration. You could even go, GDPR respected, so far that you check the face and that you see if you have a valid driver's license, and it automatically checks if you speed, and if you're driving too fast, then you simply you get a penalty at home. And the effect is the same. People will stop speeding. We have two complete different mechanisms of control, where the one stops physically cars in a very limited number, and we control 100% in a very high-tech way. The effect is the same. People will not speed anymore. That's what it's all about. And that's what we need to do with the volumes that we have. We have to take a different view on the world, a different way of looking at everything. And what we actually try to do is to have a shift from what we call from if-then rules to real risks. The image shows now in the current world, you say, there may be sharks in the sea, and because the fact that there may be sharks in the sea, it is dangerous, so you shouldn't swim. But the more information that you have, the more data that you have, you can create information out of that. What you do is to say, but let's look a little bit deeper. Not every shark is dangerous. So look at the situation, the current situation. Are the sharks in there? Are that dangerous sharks? And are they actually at the moment in a position that they would attack the people? Because only then it would be dangerous to swim. And that is adding the analysis based on a traditional declaration, changing that from creating context rules and additional information on the declaration to make a better decision on customs. That is actually what we want to achieve. and that is in the theory we call that automated risk selection, automated targeting, and use of modern techniques and modern algorithms, which at the end will help us making better decisions again, maybe even less physical controls, maybe even less customs officers asking for individual invoices, but at the end we have mechanisms in place to manage these high volumes. We will never end up with the individual discussions. Even trusted traders can have a dispute with us, and we can have discussions in court. There's no problem about that. But it's about the fact how you deal with the majority of the goods, that you translate them into green, yellow, and blue, and still, we are still customs officers, and those customs officers still stand with their feet every day in the mud and have to deal with logistics. Short story about a modern organization trying to do enforcement in a modern way.